Good morning. It's so nice to see your faces, and I'm so glad that you chose to be here on this lovely summer day. Today, I'm talking about money. This sermon arose from a class I took this past year about parish administration. One of my assignments was to write about my credo of money. As I sat down to do the assignment, I was shocked that I hadn't been asked to think about my theology of money before. Money, something that affects so much in our lives, is generally something we don't talk about very much. It's almost taboo to talk about it at all. And yet, money plays such a large part in our ethical and moral lives. The saying goes that to discover what your priorities are, you just need to look at your credit card statement. As Unitarian Universalists, we're often invited to shift our spending patterns to be more aligned with our values, usually during stewardship season. Today, I'm asking us to go deeper than that, to ponder what money is, what our relationship to money is, and what we want that relationship to look like. What is money? Money is a symbol. Money is complicated. It's one measure our society uses to determine the comparative value of resources. Food is a resource. Wood and brick are resources. Labor and energy are resources. Education is a resource. Intellectual and artistic expressions are resources. Anything you exchange money or your personal labor, skills, and expressions for is a resource. If you exchange more money for one resource than another, if the price is higher, the one that costs more money has a higher value to someone in our society. Who determines the value of a resource? Those who have power over the resources will set the price for a resource. But those who use the resources determine the value of those resources. The law of supply and demand tells us that the higher the demand and the lower the supply, the higher the price of the resource. Generally speaking, the rarer the resource, the higher its price. Helium costs more than hydrogen. The more beauty the resource is judged to hold, the higher its price. A diamond has a higher price than a piece of sea glass. The more resources required to build a resource, the higher its price. A yacht has a higher price than a canoe. The more experience a person has in managing valuable resources, the higher that person's price. A nanny gets paid less than a corporate CEO. The lighter the color of one's skin, and the closer one's proximity to others with light skin, the higher one's price. A programmer in the US gets paid more than a programmer in India. Who determines the price? Those who have power over the resource. Those who make the decisions about the resource and those who benefit from both the price of the resource and the resource itself. As you can see just from this short sermon so far, there are many factors that play into price. There is the value of the resource itself, particularly to those who want to use or own the resource. A person suffering from a disease will pay more for a treatment for that disease than someone who doesn't suffer from that disease. Then there are decisions made about the resource, made by those who hold and or have power over the resource. OPEC in the 70s physically held a large portion of the world's petroleum supply, and therefore could set the price of oil as they saw fit. Stories about the resources can also determine price. If you compare the price of a jewelry diamond versus an industrial diamond, you will see the power that story can play in the price of a resource. And there are the decisions made by those who benefit from the resource. These decisions are reflected in public policy and legal systems. These decisions can be made by labor unions, by consumers, by grassroots organizations. What about wealth? Wealth is money storage. Money is stored in physical things we own: homes, cars, jewelry, sports memorabilia. When storing money in objects, we generally want the value of that object to be preserved. But the problem with objects is their value tends to lessen over time. Houses and cars get less valuable the more they're exposed to the natural elements and the more they're used. As for jewelry and sports memorabilia, their value fluctuates. They go in and out of fashion. To be most efficient as money storage, objects need to be protected from losing monetary value. And better yet, they would increase in monetary value. Before the Industrial Revolution, when travel was slow, difficult, and dangerous, people were limited by the resources in their immediate surroundings. What they used to build their lives was what was close by. Wealth was built from land and buildings, last year's crop stores, livestock, metal goods. Any wealth needed to be taken care of or protected from being taken by others. Wealth was physical. Today, while wealth can still be physical, such as land and buildings or valuable goods, most of the wealth of those who are privileged to have it is kept in banks as investments, in companies or corporations, or in some intangible form. I am privileged to have an IRA, but I can't go somewhere and physically look at my retirement savings. I look at that number on a quarterly statement. I don't have to take care of the money in the account. It doesn't take up physical space, so I don't have to physically store it anywhere or protect it from intruders or thieves, beyond keeping my social security number and password to myself. I make decisions that I hope will keep its value from going down, and ideally will result in its value going up. If the value does go up, it's because a bank has loaned part of my money to someone else and has collected interest from the person who is paying off the loan. Or the value might have gone up because a company I own shares in has made a profit by paying people to do work. Because I have saved money, I can make money in essence by not working for it myself, but from other people working for it. If I still have wealth when I die, I pass it on to my heirs, allowing the next generation to build their wealth, to give them a step up. As we saw with price setting, whether the monetary value of wealth goes up or down is not a neutral process. When this country was founded, enslaved Africans were wealth for the slave owners. After the American Civil War, when slavery was abolished, those who were in power limited the economic options for those who were no longer enslaved. Those who were in power best benefited from cotton. And so that was where those of African descent were most likely to get jobs. Those in power decided how to compensate those working in the fields. Those who benefited from the story of the superiority of white people created covenants and financial policies that excluded people of color from their neighborhoods and from access to loans. To this day, houses in neighborhoods with a majority white population appreciate more than those in neighborhoods with predominantly non-white residents. According to a 2019 survey, in the United States, the median household income for a Black household was 40% less than the median household income of a white household. In another US study from 2016, 5 years ago, the median household wealth of a Black household was less than 10% of the median household wealth of a white household. Less than 10%. We're talking $13,000 versus $149,000. $13,000. That includes retirement, home equity, everything. We haven't seen wealth disparities like that since 1968. And that's before any effects of COVID. It's hard to realize that our society empowers those who already hold power, who make decisions that place higher monetary values on resources like diamonds and gold over shared resources like air, soil, and water, places more value on business management than on care of our children and households, and privileges one's skin color over another. The financial system in the United States makes life more difficult for the poor and easier for those who already have enough. Legal and financial fees and tax rates proportionately favor those who have more money than those who have less. Now, I'm not a communist, and I'm not saying that we should all give away our earthly possessions and live in tents in the woods. Despite what we dream our world should look like, we have to make decisions in today's world. Rather than vows of poverty, what I am inviting us to do is to learn about how our country is structured and think about how our day-to-day decisions about money and resources might better align with our values, the principles we profess as Unitarian Universalists. Lynn Twist, in her book, The Soul of Money, highlights 3 toxic myths that are prevalent in US society. The first myth is that there is not enough, and it is commonly accepted that some in our society will have what they need and some won't. The second myth is that more is better. The more someone has, the better they are, and the more power and status they have. The third myth is that's just the way it is. There's nothing we can do to change number 1 and number 2. When we as a society succumb to scarcity thinking, when wealth becomes just a number that doesn't need nurturing or protection, and when society tells us the more we have, the more valuable we are, it makes it more acceptable to accumulate beyond what we need to live meaningful lives. In fact, I would say that the very act of accumulating money and resources in pursuit of status or personal value can prevent us from leading meaningful lives. I believe there is something we can do to lead better lives and have a better relationship money. It starts with believing that there is enough for everyone. Robin Wall Kimmerer, an Indigenous botanist, shares her Indigenous theology in her book, Braiding Sweetgrass. This system of theology sees not only animals, but rocks, water, and plants as living brethren. It acknowledges that to live, one must take life, and that when one takes from the earth, one has the responsibility to give back to the earth. Everything on earth is our kin. To live, one takes life. When we take, we give back. These are transformative ideas. They emphasize our role as part of the earth rather than master over the earth, or as empowered or entitled to take more than we need. It builds a value system based on having enough rather than having more, having reverence for what we take so that we may live, and giving back so that others may also live. This concept of giving back when we take this reciprocity is beyond obligation or pity. It is not an act of charity. It is a way of being in relationship with this beautiful and wondrous world. Just as you take love and give love to your partner or your child, the impulse to give back as you take, reciprocity, is a fundamental part of the relationship of love you share with your loved one. So it is when we take what we need from the earth, because we are part of the earth. We belong to the earth. So, what can we do to change our relationships with money? Certainly, climate change has drawn a clear picture of how resource use will affect our future if changes are not made. I think the pandemic has given many of us the time and incentive to reassess our priorities and values. When you notice a difference in the amount that something costs or someone is being paid, I invite you to consider what that says about who is making the decisions on how that price is set, who benefits from those decisions, and that may include you, and who might be left out or adversely affected by these decisions. And then ask yourself, how can you act with that knowledge according to your values? If you have investments, research the companies in your portfolios and consider investing in socially responsible investments. I've found that when I change the phrase home or land ownership to home or land stewardship, it changes my frame of mind when making maintenance decisions. We can learn about systemic causes of poverty and racially based oppression and work with organizations fighting against those systems, such as Black Lives Matter, the Poor People's Campaign, UU the Vote, and so many others. We can talk to each other about money. Break the taboo. Share with each other your ideas for aligning your relationship with money to your values. You are more than your possessions or lack thereof. You are more than your job. You are more than any value society would place on you. You hold infinite value by being gloriously you and living into the infinitely valuable role you play in this beautiful and wondrous world. Together, may we know that there is enough for all to thrive. May we open our hearts to each other and learn to live in ways that heal rather than harm, and work towards a more sustainable, equitable, and just world. May it be so.